About 1825 or 6:25 p.m. on November 23, 1987, a Beech 1900C operated by Ryan Air Service crashed short of runway 3 at the Homer Airport in Homer, Alaska. Flight 103 was scheduled to a Part 135 operating flight out of Kodiak, Alaska to Anchorage, Alaska, with intermediate stops in Homer and Kenai. Both flight crew members and 16 passengers were fatally injured. 3 passengers were seriously injured. The NTSB determined the probable cause of this accident to be the failure of the flight crew to properly supervise the loading of the airplane, which resulted in the center of gravity being displaced to such an aft location that airplane control was lost when the flaps were lowered for landing. The safety issues discussed in the report include performance of the Beech 1900, the FAA's oversight of Ryan, and Ryan's management and operation. We'd like to thank the National Transportation Safety Board for allowing us to use this information on the Beech 1900 crash at Homer, Alaska. In Kodiak, the airplane was designated as Ryan 103. There were 17 male passengers, many were hunters, and 2 female passengers. They all boarded the airplane and occupied the 19 available seats. The airplane was emptied of cargo and no fuel was added. The Kodiak station agent stated to the first officer he asked that the airplane be loaded with 1,500 pounds of cargo. The agent thought the officer's request was unusual because previous 1900 pilots operating with full passenger load asked for 1,100 or 1,200 pounds of cargo. The station agent also said that the first officer told her, quote, "Before we could get the 1,500 pounds on board, it would bulk out," end quote. The baggage loader stated that with the assistance of the captain and first officer, he loaded cargo into the compartments. In addition to suitcases, gun cases, frozen crabs, 2 dogs in kennels, the cargo included approximately 13 to 14 pieces of packaged venison that weighed 795 pounds. The venison, which was destined for Kenai, had been stored overnight. The teletyped loading information from the Kodiak station agent to the Homer station agent indicated that 160 pounds of cargo destined for Homer, 1,010 pounds of cargo for Kenai, and 267 pounds for Anchorage. That's a total of 1,437 pounds. The baggage loader stated that after loading the cargo, the tail stand was about 1 inch from the ground, and that's the lowest to the ground he had ever seen a tail stand. He stated that typically the tail stand came to 3 to 4 inches or more of touching the ground. A passenger on the flight testified that he thought the airplane would, quote, never become airborne during takeoff. He said after the main gear lifted off the runway, the airplane fell back the runway and accelerated for another 15 knots before it became airborne. The passenger stated that the airplane seemed to climb out rather steeply. The flight crew retracted the gear and 10 inches of takeoff flaps and contracted the air traffic control at 5:44 p.m. and climbed through 1,900 feet. At 10 minutes after 6 p.m., the air traffic control cleared the airplane to descend to 6,000 feet and expect an arrival to Homer, and they asked him to speed up because there was another airplane coming in. Ground witnesses described Flight 103 when it was on short final approach to the Homer Airport. Its wings began to rock back and forth, and then it dropped steeply to the ground in a rather flat attitude. The airplane struck the airport perimeter fence before sliding to a stop on its belly. Wreckage and impact information. The aircraft wreckage located along runway 3 was distributed along a distance of about 159 feet on a heading of 355 degrees. A videotape taken 4 hours after the accident revealed rime ice with an accumulation of 3/8 of an inch on the leading edges of the wings, horizontal stabilizer, stable-on tallets, vertical stabilizer, and nose cone. No other ice accumulation was observed on the airplane. The landing gear actuators indicated that the gear was down and locked at the time of impact. The propeller blades on both engines, which were composed of composite material, were broken away at their hubs and scattered along the wreckage path. The fuselage came to rest with a slight list to the left side. The belly structure was compressed. The skin was wrinkled from the nose and rearward along both sides of the fuselage. A longitudinal wrinkle extended along the center of the top fuselage along the aft cabin entrance door to the dorsal fin. Both sides of the empennage were wrinkled at the pressure bulkhead joint. The lower empennage aft cargo door was severely crushed on the left side. The lower left wing surfaces were heavily damaged from their wing root to the outboard of the landing gear well. Numerous ribs were broken and or crushed. The flap handle was in the up position. The flap actuator attachment brackets were broken. The right flap actuator was found in the intermediate position between 7 inches and 12 inches. Company procedure was to select full, that's 35-degree flaps, when landing was assured. The airplane's flight control systems, including its lift cables, were found intact and functioning with acceptable parameters. The cockpit stabilizer manual trim wheel and the associated trim cables were found in the full nose-down position against the nose-down stops. According to rescue personnel, none of the passenger seats were found attached to the floor or sidewall tracks. Seat track frames were twisted and bent. Several had separated from the pivot bracket attached to the seat pan frame. Seat pan frames had separated and were bent downwards. The seat pan frame supports the seat cushion was torn through. Several seats were missing one or both seat legs, with some seat legs having separated legs. The seat belts were found attached to the seats and fully operational. The cockpit seats were attached to their seat tracks and were in place. The seat pan fabric was found torn on both seats. The right seat had separated downward from the seat pan from the frame tubes. There was no fire. The passenger seats were certificated to inertial loads of the FAA regulations. That's 3 Gs upwards and 3 Gs downwards and 9 Gs longitudinal, 1.5 Gs lateral. Using the airplane's attitude at impact and assumed impact velocity and crush damage to the fuselage, the safety board determined the values of the average accelerations at impact along the airplane's longitudinal, lateral, and vertical axis. The range of these accelerations were 7 to 10 Gs longitudinal, 4.8 to 7.3 Gs lateral, and 19 to 35 Gs vertical. Vertical velocity change was about 42 feet per second. The safety board investigators removed and weighed all cargo, checked baggage, carry-on baggage. The cargo and baggage weighed 2,283 pounds. However, some of the articles had been subjected to wetness from snow and firefighting and foam before weighing. Actual aircraft weights were obtained for the 19 passengers. The average weight of each passenger was 190.5 pounds. That included the initial and all subsequent weight and balance computations. The weights of the 2 dogs, one weighing 64 pounds and the other weighing 81 pounds. The dogs who survived the accident were transported in kennels that were loaded into the forward portion of the aft cargo compartment. The safety board calculated the least and most conservative weight and CG location values based on the actual passenger and cargo weights and known cargo locations on the airplane. Because the exact distribution of the cargo between the forward baggage compartment, cabin, and aft cargo compartment was not known, 2 weight and balance calculations were made to provide a range of CG location. So in condition A, one of the 2 conditions calculated, the airplane empty weight was 9,163.4 pounds. Crew and baggage was 320. There were 3,619.5 pounds of baggage and cargo distributed between the nose, the forward baggage compartment, carry-on, aft baggage, which included forward and aft section. The total baggage and cargo was 2,283.7 pounds. Fuel, the ramp weight fuel at Kodiak was 1,836.5. Taxi and run-up would have used 110 pounds. So if we take these numbers, we multiply them by the moment with their CG locations, we come up with these numbers. Fuel burned en route was 828 pounds. The condition before the crash was 16,284.3. And that was calculated as CG of 311.1 inches. The second scenario that the NTSB thought was possible was very similar. The only difference was in the weights of the baggage. The condition B resulted in a CG of 308.33 inches aft of reference, or 8.43s aft of the limit at Kodiak. Allowing for 828 pounds of fuel burned at Homer, the estimated landing weight was 16,169, or 69 pounds over the maximum allowable landing weight. The resultant CG was 308.54, or 8.864 inches aft of the limit.